As I mentioned in my talk, immersive technology, which is AR, VR, all those things, is poised to become the driving force behind the realization of Industry 4.0. As manufacturing and automation continue to evolve, immersive technology offers a transformative solution that revolutionizes the way we design, produce, and operate in industrial landscape. By seamlessly blending the digital and the physical worlds, immersive technology holds the potential to optimize processes, enhance productivity, improve safety, and unlock unprecedented levels of innovation. Our panel discussion will explore how immersive technology is set to drive Industry 4.0 by reshaping the manufacturing industry and propelling us into a new era of efficiency, connectivity, and intelligent automation. Well, let's start with the introductions here quickly.
Yeah, great. Chris Bella from Light Guide. Great to be here. Very thankful and look forward to the lively discussion.
Jason Price, Virtual Oil Innovations. Again, happy to be here. Happy to support everybody in this room and the community. Macomb County is great. It's been a great experience through my past career and my current career. It's a great area to live, play, work, and work together. Thank you.
My name is Matt Moy. I'm a systems engineer at Rave Computer, and really appreciate everyone's time today, and thanks for having us here.
So we'll start with some applications of this immersive technology. So first question is for you, Chris. What are some tangible examples of how immersive technology is currently being utilized in the manufacturing sector to drive Industry 4.0 applications?
Yeah, great. So quick note, we've been around, company founded in 2005, so we were doing augmented reality before it was a thing, AR before it was AR. We would also agree that, most of, I think, the opportunity for you as practitioners, manufacturing companies, engineers, consultants, really are in the middle of that continuum between, the human reality, the virtual realities, in the augmented reality space where we see the most practical applications. Largely that's focused on four areas. Actual assembly work, complex assembly, where humans are doing manual work, typically long cycle time work. So not seconds, but several minutes of work. That's usually in a high mix environment, right, where you got a lot of variation going down the assembly line. So complex manual assembly, certainly material handling, part picking, kitting, sequencing. Again, for those of you in the manufacturing space, automotive space, these are very familiar, areas and applications. Testing and inspection. I do want to, that was a great video where you were seeing both guidance, right? So that augmented reality guidance, placing objects, text, animations, videos, as an overlay on the physical space, the parts bins and the fixtures and the assembly itself. So, the inspection part of that comes along with the immersive environment, right? Because we're using both projected augmented reality, largely, but not only. We do wearables and handhelds. And then finally, training, right? Training. And I maybe should say training first because for many companies, that's the first stage of adoption, to bring an AR solution into the factory for doing training. Could be online training on the process, in the assembly line itself. Could be offline training stations. So those we find we find customers are really adopting in those areas first and foremost.
Thank you, Chris. Next question is for Matt. Just like any new technology, users of immersive technology are faced with a lot of unknowns. What challenges or obstacles do organizations face when implementing immersive technology, and how can they overcome them?
Being that Rave is a computer manufacturer, one of the things I'd like to address is just sort of the challenges relating to compute hardware. So with VR and AR, the fact is it's just computationally expensive to render these scenes. These headsets tend to run at really high resolutions. You have really high refresh rates, so higher frame rates are required. And then on top of that, with motion tracking, there's just constant motion. When you're sitting at a workstation on a 2D display, the scene only updates when you give it input. So there's some degree of static frames. But when you have the headset on, it's constantly changing everything that you're seeing, and there's just a lot of compute required to keep up with all that. The other issue is that with traditional methods, if you had limited performance or some sort of issue rendering the scene, it's still useful. It's still visible in a way that's not far off from what's ideal. And AR/VR, high performance is critical. It not only will it not give you the realism if the performance isn't there or if there's issues, it can lead to motion sickness and just discomfort, and nobody's going to want to spend any time in that environment if those issues are present. So it is quite complex. Aside from the compute hardware, you have the different tracking sensors, the HMDs themselves, and all these things need to play nicely together for everything to work. So there's some complexity involved. Aside from that, you have stakeholder buy-in, which can also be a big challenge. And for that, I would say that the best way to address that is just to have some firsthand experience with it. We've done a lot of demos with this equipment, with this type of technology over the years, and it's really easy to convince people that there's value in this when they can actually see it for themselves. But it's very, very difficult to communicate that in other ways.
Thank you. Did you say that technology is catching up with these complexities in the headsets, the newer ones? Every time we see a new headset, it's smaller and more capable and all that.
Yes, absolutely. So if you go back a number of years, the field of view was extremely limited. There's far less of an ecosystem to support these kind of activities. Things are just getting making tremendous leaps every year. A really clear way to sort of explain that would just be reading text inside a VR scene. A few years ago, in the early days of the headsets, text was very pixelated. Let's say you were in a virtual aircraft cockpit. It's going to be very difficult to read text on the displays or text on the controls. With these latest generation of headsets, that's just not an issue at all. I can, using a Vario headset, with the pass-through cameras, I can hold up my phone and read small text on the screen, no problem, and all that can be done rather seamlessly.
Thank you, Max. Next question is for Jason. Immersive technology has been labeled as one of the key technologies for Industry 4.0. In your opinion, what are and will be the primary drivers behind the adoption of this technology in the manufacturing or other industries?
As far as things go, in my opinion, most people on this panel understand the technology and what's there. Most of people, we'll just say Macomb County, are unaware of what it is. They need to be educated about it, and they're intimidated by it. If it's a business or not using it correctly, or how much does it cost, or how much do I have to get the return on the investment. So for us, when we do this, we take it from the smallest scale, from a single business owner to a big corporation, of what we do, and primarily we create that digital twin that we heard about, and we can take it on different levels for what the cost is or what the education is, and it just doesn't limit them, so they're not afraid of it to start and get overwhelmed. It's bringing them in kind of that baby steps where we lead it and hand it over to these guys where they're professionals in their industries, but as small business, communities, government, school districts, that's where I've seen in a short amount of time running this company of how to get through to the average person and make them feel comfortable with it, because it is coming faster and faster every day. We work with companies globally, beta testing and everything, so I believe my job is to help everybody out there understand it and get through to it and move on.
Thank you, Jason. Next question is for Chris. One of the key areas of the use of immersive technology is worker training and skill development. How can this technology help workers in an industrial environment?
Right. Yeah, I mentioned training previously. So it is a great entree point for any of you thinking about adopting, any of the immersive technologies. Think about today's reality with skilled labor, unskilled labor for that matter. There is a dearth of talent available. And so the training component, when you're bringing new employees in the door, whether they're going to be working on the assembly line, whether they're going to be working in the warehouse, or even working in an engineering capacity, supporting folks. So we like to think of that the human asset is the most important asset that you're investing in your company, right? So training is that natural entree point for any of these immersive technologies, AR, VR, or even things that you're doing in a pure virtual domain. We have found that in fact the training curve, the learning curve can be cut from days or weeks to hours, hours. And we even have in some examples, some anecdotes from our customers where like I deployed on the factory floor in a manufacturing operation, and this is the reality in manufacturing. You got a weekend shift and an evening shift, and untrained Chris needs to be thrust into action at a station that he's never run before, right? Because nobody else is available. So that learning curve can be immediate, in fact, with the right kind of technology enablement. So it's absolutely an imperative, I believe. And also think about who's coming into the workforce. These are digital natives, right? So I think about my kids, and some of you younger folks in the audience here, where you just expect or demand technology in your hands to do your job and do it effectively. There's this concept of the gamification of work, right? So that you do have an interactive and immersive environment. So yes, it's very much, I think, a great first application for any of these immersive technologies.
Thank you. I can vouch for that we had one of your setups at an event, and we had an object that I think it had 6 or 7 parts. Nobody had seen it before, and we had people line up for competing it, assembling it under 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Just by using this technology,
Great.
guiding them. So that's fabulous. Next question is for Matt. Can you share any successful use cases where immersive technology has resulted in substantial improvements in operational efficiency or cost reduction?
Yeah. So I'll give you a couple brief examples. In architecture, engineering, and construction, we worked with a construction company that uses this technology heavily, and they were actually one of the early adopters of it, going back a number of years. One of the projects that I had some visibility on that they did was a high school remodel or renovation in Michigan, actually. And it was extremely helpful for them to be able to take school administrators and just put them in a VR scene and walk through all these new wings and these new areas of the building and make critical decisions before any construction began. As anyone who's used this technology before has seen, there's just certain things that you'll never be able to notice or discover, in traditional ways of looking at these models on a 2D screen or otherwise. But when you can actually walk through it, and that's really the key difference. Instead of observing passively what the scene looks like, it literally puts you inside the scene. So it does give you a very unique perspective. So that's been very helpful in their business. In automotive, that's also very popular for the automotive companies to use this in the design workflow. And there's a lot of examples of how that's being used, but my favorite example of all the time I've been working in this technology is when we've done demos for automotive companies, when designers are using this technology for the very first time, especially when we have the luxury of bringing one of their models in, so they're actually able to see their design in VR for the first time. And I've seen this a number of times. People will just sort of explode with excitement because they'll see an issue that they would have never been able to identify until it was too late, or they'll see something that could be vastly improved. And again, these are observations that they literally start yelling or laughing or whatever reaction you can imagine, just because they're just so grateful that there's now a tool that will able to make them that much more effective. So that's just extremely rewarding when you can show somebody something and there's just an immediate, acknowledgement that it has tremendous value.
Thank you, man. Well, I guess if a picture is worth 1,000 words, a VR is worth 1,000,000 words. Next question for Jason. Collaboration and communication between teams is an essential part of any project. How can immersive technology facilitate this and make it better?
I think adding on what Matt said, for us and what we've seen out there, the construction industry's been great. It seemed, obviously, it boomed a little bit after COVID because everything was shut down. You couldn't go anywhere, so they couldn't do this, couldn't do that. And now using, the digital twin and VR and AR and, just basic virtual tours, they're using it and collaborating. Every contractor can be on the same page and add notes and go back in the timeline to show what was there. And it saves so much time and effort on many employees, and they're realizing that they're saving money in the end, because that's what rolls in a lot of the big companies, that saving money and time. Right? And where else do we do that? With this technology, it's great. We've seen from our last journey, unfortunately, with the situations with schools, with active shooters and everything going on, that's where our background came in, where we've taken this digital footprint, this twin, and now have created it so law enforcement, firefighters, EMS, even the teachers and staff can virtually go through these things, train prior to, and be familiar with it. And we just don't stop there. We create different platforms for every stage of it. And that brings it into the VR, AR world that you've seen with the gaming and everything else. So we can take that actual school, which law enforcement, they're used to walking through a fake school. We can use the real school, and they can actually train on it and have the whole atmosphere, as scary as it is, but they can train on it and be ready for it when it gets there. And that's the same with the staff, and same with even the students. We're putting them in those situations. It's not going away, unfortunately. We have to adapt to it. And this type of technology, we've seen that, if we can save one more life, I want to save them all, I really do. But if I can save one more, I'm making a difference 10 and get in 20, that's the goal, to save everybody. But using the technology alone on every level, I think it's been great. And that's the collaboration that you just can't get what we've had in the past. It's phenomenal.
Thank you, Jason. Next question is for Chris. How can immersive technology help address workforce challenges, such as labor shortages or aging workforce?
Great, yeah. I mentioned the digital natives, previously, but let's think about folks who are nearing the end of their career, or actually deciding to move on to those golden years. So what we find is that despite best efforts from manufacturing engineers, industrial engineers to define, document manufacturing processes, standard work as we refer to it, right, in industry. In fact, there's nothing standard about what happens out on the factory floor in most cases, right? I'm going to do the job one way, and Jason, Matt, we're all going to do it slightly different. So, by deploying technology, immersive technology, it really does kind of force the discipline of defining standard work. And also, it's now a tool to capture that tribal knowledge, that expert knowledge from folks who've been doing the job for 10, 20, 30 years, right? And then, capturing that in a platform that can be used by anyone to operate at a very high level of proficiency. So, yeah, there's turnover is a very major challenge for manufacturing companies around the globe. I think it's acute here in the U.S. when we talk to customers in Europe or Asia. It's not quite the problem that it is here in the U.S. and North America. So it really is helpful in that regard with labor shortages, a lot of turnover, and comes back to that learning curve, training curve, and more fundamentally, standardizing work so that everyone can work effectively and efficiently.
Thank you, Chris. Next question is for Matt. How can immersive technology be integrated with other emerging technologies, such as AI or Internet of Things, to create more advanced manufacturing ecosystem? And we can talk about like digital twins and all that.
Yeah, so I've got two examples that I can cover for this. The first one it has to do with ray tracing. So if you've paid attention to the gaming industry or graphics in general, the last few years, ray tracing has been a big topic. And it's always been a goal because that ray tracing is basically where you simulate the lighting effects and how they interact with the physical materials to create really realistic looking scenes. So the problem with that is it's very, very difficult for the computer hardware to be able to do that quickly. It requires a lot of compute power. So again, as I mentioned, that's always been the goal to get there to where scenes are rendered that way, but we're still quite a ways off to where you can render a scene in real time and have every pixel ray traced. So AI kind of took a lot of people by surprise when it was used as a way to address this. So instead of having the entire scene ray traced, now what we can do with AI is only render the scene at a lower resolution or render a portion of the scene, and then use AI to basically predict what those remaining pixels are supposed to look like. So when you see ray tracing in games, for example, right now, it's actually using that exact technique. It's using, in NVIDIA's case, DLSS to basically create AI up-res. AMD's technology is called FSR, but it's a really, really clever approach. It's completely sort of changed the way we think about how these things scale, because for as long as these computer graphics have been around, it's required more computational power to scale performance. And here's a really unexpected technique using AI to get us, decades ahead overnight. But the more interesting example that you touched on is probably the digital twin. So the digital twin basically is a virtual model that is tied into physical things, whether it's people, processes, or machines in the real world. So if you imagine like a factory floor, you could have a virtual model of that's reading sensor data from every piece of equipment in that factory floor, perhaps monitoring individual activity. And the great thing with having a digital twin is now you can use AI predictive modeling to basically figure out what would happen in these different scenarios, how you can optimize the process, and just discover all sorts of things that would either be too dangerous or too expensive or too time consuming to do with traditional means.
Thank you, Matt. AI to the rescue. And Chris, do you have any?
In terms of AI, we're already seeing practical applications. For instance, in machine vision, right? If any of you are machine vision savvy or programmers deploying vision into your, manufacturing lines, there's great AI tool sets now for what used to take an expert vision programmer. Now you capture a handful of frames. Just view as 10 frames of a good part, 10 frames of a bad part, and the AI models will train. By the way, it doesn't always take a ton of computational power that we're finding. You can train at the edge, so to speak, on the local device, especially if you have a powerful RAID computer. You can train at the edge instead of in the cloud. So that's one area. And then AI operating on large data sets, big data, that's where you can glean from thousands of build cycles. You can process that data into an AI model and derive insights. Why is it that the second shift actually performs better than the first shift? What is happening there is that the nature of the workforce, is the product mix, and so there's some really powerful tools in that regard. And I guess my last comment on that is hopefully this doesn't sound overwhelming or foreboding, because these tool sets are now very accessible. Especially with how various software companies, not just like that, but others are making very easy to use and program tools, drag and drop, visual programming, low code, no code type environments. So it's very accessible to everybody really to put these tools to use.
From a long-term perspective, what developments or advancements do you anticipate for immersive technology in driving Industry 4.0? looking into future?
Looking to the future, obviously, the cost of everything is huge for a lot of companies. Of how much do I have to invest into it, from starting with the digital twin all the way through to the final product, which what hardware, which software, where it needs to be. And as you spoke earlier, it seems day by day you see the prices go down a little bit for this or a little bit of that, and they're not overwhelmed by it. Because when I started it, back in craftsman construction, I mean, you were limited to only certain little things, and the computer only pushed so far to go, and then it just started smoking, right? And shut down, and you couldn't reboot it. I mean, so there's that frustration and where it's going, but it's just like you see with your cell phone technology, it's changing every version by every 6 months now. But as the technology is getting better, the cost is coming down, so that's pushing the industry where it's affordable to the smallest business, the largest corporation, and again, taking that intimidation, that threat of what's it going to cost me and what's my return on it. And I think that's where, as the audience here and the community and the world is seeing that it's going to be available for everybody on each scale for what you need it for. And I think that's, it's going to help the industry, obviously, by means of, where this world's going now and what we have to change to stay on track and get ahead. And I believe this technology, what we're talking about today, is the way of the future. And obviously the younger generation believes it, sees it. If we got to put it in the gaming world, okay, we understand, we'll adapt to it, but it's working, and I think we're going to make big strides with it.
Thank you, Jason. Next question for Chris. How can organizations measure the return on investment and tangible benefits of implementing immersive technology in their manufacturing operations?
Yeah, another great question. So, show of hands, how many of you folks who are in a technical capacity, have to go to the finance team, to the CFO to get your projects, your capital approved? Yeah, so a good many, right? And that's not always easy to do, right? There's fundamentals on technology investments and how to drive return on that investment, right? It does boil down to a handful of key economic factors that can be readily modeled: improvements in quality, improvements in labor productivity. We talk about throughput, right? If you can reduce cycle time in a complex manual operation, let's say you can go from 1 minute to 30 seconds, right? Not only can you reduce your labor content by 50% in so doing, the flip side of that coin is throughput, right? So you need fewer workstations, fewer fixtures, less machinery, less plant floor space. All of these elements can be modeled in what we developed for our customers, a simple business value assessment or ROI calculator. We find that it used to be that the threshold for payback could be as long as 2 or 3 years. Guess what? That's come down, right? The CFO now wants to see payback in a year or less. And oftentimes, we're finding that the output of the ROI model is 3 to 6 months, to payback, right? What does that mean? Irrespective of what flavor of immersive technology you're deploying, the cost curve has come down. The payback is fairly quick and effective in terms of getting that project approved. Okay. Finally, you'll see a lot of folks in the space are adopting a subscription business model. What does that mean? That means instead of a big CapEx number, you can offer to your finance team that this will be an operating expense, rather than a CapEx number, and usually, at a much lower annual spend. So there's a lot of ways to, tackle the ROI question and make all of this immersive technology that we're talking about affordable and readily deployable.
Thank you, Chris. So this last question is for the whole panel. So what advice or recommendations would you provide to organizations considering the adoption of immersive technology?
You
just go down the road?
Okay, all right. 3 things I would say. Number 1, know what problem you're solving. Meaning, set your opportunity according to where the pain is. Right? Maybe that sounds obvious and intuitive, right? You got a big quality problem, right? And immersive technology can help drive 0 defects, or in our case, we oftentimes see 80-90% defect reduction, that's very quantifiable. So number one, kind of think about what problems you want to solve first and foremost in that Pareto chart approach. Number two, obvious again, build executive support, build that support, to make sure you're getting buy-in. And number three, not just the executive support, but I think most importantly, get the buy-in from the factory floor. Engage the men and women, again, your most important assets on the factory floor, who are going to use the technology to do their job, right? Technology can be scary, right? Any kind of change can be scary, but especially if you're handing them a headset or, now they see projectors and cameras, guiding them or quote unquote watching them. So you really got to get buy-in from the factory floor. I said it last, but it's probably most important.
I'd have to highlight what Kurt says. I mean, the scare factor, it's human nature, right? But let's make it easy for them. Let's take them in them small steps to get them where they need to go. And that still piggybacks, what's your problem? Being from my background, you have a problem, it's my job to solve it. And what can I do at your level? From the smallest business to the largest corporation. And I'll get you through the steps. And even if the smallest one's purchased, we can lead into those larger steps as you go. So that budget's there and you can plan for it. And that's where we lead into the local companies and help them out. And this is your next step. If you're afraid of the VR goggles, but you're going to rave next to decide where to go. They're going to treat you right. But to get them there, and that's where, me working with local ones is try to help each other, try to guide them in the right directions, because it is intimidating. Or what do I do? And I don't want to make mistakes, or you're the one going in asking for that money, and now there's a mistake. Well, we have trustworthy people in this lovely county that can do this, and it's amazing. So I commend everybody in the room and the gentleman up here with me. It's a good push, and it needs all of us to work together to get this to go.
I guess one of the challenges or one of the things that I would definitely recommend is just getting firsthand experiences. We've kind of all touched on it at a few different points today. It's really difficult to really understand what the capability and the value is without seeing it for yourself. Beyond that, I would say try more than one option too. Try as many as you can. If you came to me and I recommended a Vario XR3 for your use case, try a product from HTC or Meta and just so you have that perspective on how they compare and what the value really is. And then Chris mentioned buy-in from the end users. Yes, that's critical, and I think what sort of ties in with that is proof of concept testing. So even if you have a really well thought out plan and you know exactly how you want to execute and you know exactly what you need to accomplish all of this, it's really important to start at some smaller scale and just kind of prove everything out. That's when you loop in the end users and get everybody's feedback to figure out what sort of problems there are early on. Kind of the same reasons why this immersive technology helps solve other problems. You need to sort of apply that here as well and make sure that the plan is proved out at the early stages.
Thank you all. You all get an A grade.